I'm recording this from a cramped little apartment over the marina, and I need you to understand something before I get into what happened. I need you to know the Minnesota starvation experiment was real. I'm not bullshitting you. In the mid-1940s, at the University of Minnesota, Dr. Ansel Keys took 36 guys who refused to fight in World War II and starved them in the name of science. 6 months on semi-starvation, heavy labor, about 1,800 calories a day. Then a rehabilitation phase where they try to figure out how to safely refeed people. You can look it up later if you want. The results were ugly as hell. Men obsessing over food, licking plates, cutting recipes out of magazines like porn, talking about cannibalism. Some mutilated themselves. One of them chopped off his fingers and couldn't say if it was on purpose. Their personalities warped. Some never came back from it. Not really. They did it to figure out how to refeed starving people after the war. That's the line. Anyway, what most people don't know is that the military watched that experiment very closely. Not because they cared about hungry civilians, because they wanted to know what happens to a body and mind when you push it right to the edge and keep it there. Now jump forward a couple decades. Cold War, nuclear submarines, long patrols, deep dives. The Navy starts obsessing over human limits in extreme environments. How long can you keep a man at depth? How far can you push his body before he breaks? What does isolation do to him when the only thing between him and the ocean is a few inches of steel and some faith? They used Keys data. They built something with it. I know that because I've seen it. I used to be a demolition consultant. Marine side. I specialized in offshore decommissioning and underwater structures. Old rigs, research stations, subsea labs that had outlived their usefulness. If they needed to be cut apart, sunk, or hauled up in pieces, my company sent me to figure out how to do it without killing anyone. I was a demolition consultant. 3 weeks ago, I took a contract I should have walked away from. Officially, it was just another obsolete Navy asset. A decommissioned underwater habitat sitting in about 250 feet of water, 12 miles off the coast. It went online in 1968 as part of a saturation diving research program. That's what it said in the sanitized brief they gave me. Most of it had been sealed since the late 80s. Too expensive to modernize, too dangerous to leave intact, blah blah. My job: dive it, survey it, identify hazards, and plan the safest way to collapse the structure so it would sink into the trench instead of drifting around as a navigation hazard. Straightforward on paper. Reality was something else. The first weird detail hit me before I even saw the thing. The coordinates in my packet didn't match any of the usual charts. Someone had scrubbed this whole program, from the public records. No little note that said USN experimental structure. Nothing. Just blank blue on the map. That's unusual, but not unheard of. The Navy buries stuff. Still, I got a feeling in my gut I didn't like. The second weird thing, the name in the old paperwork. I only saw it once, on a yellowed photocopy tucked behind newer forms. Pelagic Adaptation Facility, Keys Station. Yeah, Keys. Same doctor. Same bastard. They must have hauled him in when they realized his starving volunteers did more than just lose weight. You starve a person long enough, you don't just get a thin person. You carve them into something else. They wanted to see what happened if you combine that with pressure, with isolation, with the ocean. Anyway, there I was on a Tuesday morning, standing barefoot on the deck of a contracted dive support vessel, neoprene cold against my skin, the Pacific rolling dark under a low gray sky. The kind of day where the horizon just disappears in a haze and you can't tell sea from sky. We'd anchored over the coordinates overnight. The crew was skeleton, captain, one deckhand, one tender to help me gear up. No other divers. That part annoyed me. Where's my buddy? I asked the tender. A kid named Morales, maybe mid-20s, still fresh enough that his wet suit looked new. He shrugged, not quite meeting my eye. They said you were solo today. Command's orders. Limited personnel exposure. Horseshit, I snapped. Nobody goes into a confined structure alone. That's not a suggestion. That's a rule. He gave me the helpless look you give a pissed-off customer when you're just a waiter. I just pass along what they write, man. I climbed up the ladder and leaned into the wheelhouse. The captain, old salt named Harlan, watched me with one eye from behind the wheel, the other on the instruments. "You know I'm supposed to have a second diver," I said. He shook his head slowly. "You got clearance, you got hazard pay, you got Navy brass signing waivers. They told me if you back out, they fly someone else in. Your call." I stood there with the boat rocking under my feet and the smell of diesel and salt in my nose and that printed name, Keys Station, bouncing around the back of my skull. "What happened here?" I asked. Harlan's jaw tightened. "You know better than to ask that when the Navy's paying," he said. "You go down, you do your survey, you come back up. That's it." Behind him, the radio hissed softly with distant static. For a second, I heard a faint ping beneath it, a clean little note like something hitting steel deep underwater. I chalked it up to interference. Professional curiosity is a liability in my line of work. You hear something weird, you dig, you poke, and sooner or later you find something that gets you killed. I should have refused the job. I should have told Harlan to pull anchor and pointed the bow back toward the harbor. Instead, I said, "Fine, gear me up." By 8 a.m., I was strapped into my rig. Full face mask, comms line, umbilical feeding me air from the surface, steel tank on my back as backup. Dry suit zipped and sealed. Harness snug. The Pacific looked almost black that morning, cold and heavy. "You dropped down the guideline," Morales said, clipped and professional now that we were in procedure mode. "Main habitats at 75 meters. You got about 20 minutes of work down there before we start worrying about nitrogen loading." "Copy," I said. My voice sounded calm, but my hands were sweaty inside the gloves. "We've got your video feed," he added, tapping the little monitor. "Stay on line of sight as much as you can. If anything looks hinky, you abort. You don't get extra bonus if you die down there." "You offering a bonus at all?" I asked. He smirked. "You live, you get to bill the Navy. That's your bonus." The deckhand hooked my harness to the descent line. The water slapped the hull below us, waves knocking a hollow rhythm against steel. That sound has always calmed me. The steady slap, the creaks of metal, the distant churn of the prop. Not that day. "Ready?" Morales asked. I took one breath, tasted dry, filtered air, and stepped backward off the deck in an empty space. The ocean swallowed me with a cold that bit through the suit. Water closed over my head, the roar in my ears giving way to muted hush. Bubbles streamed past my faceplate like silver lightning, then fell away as I descended. Light died fast. 10 meters, everything was wash green. 20, it faded into twilight. By 30, it was dark except for the narrow cone of my helmet light. My world narrowed to that circle of artificial day and the line trailing up into the deck lights above, already dim and far. "Hear you loud and clear, Mike." Morales' voice crackled in my ear. "Depth?" 35, I said. The sound of my own breathing filled my head. Slow, steady pulls. In, out. The hiss of gas, the soft rush as it left. 40 meters. 50. The water around me felt thicker, pressing on my suit, on my mask, on my chest. The pressure here is not something you feel like a hand. It's more like your body quietly screaming in every direction at once. A shape emerged below, a long gray tube lying on the seafloor, connected to a cluster of bulbous modules and smaller cylinders. The habitat. It looked like somebody had taken a small submarine, chopped it into sections, and bolted extra organs to it. Barnacles and rust streaked along its sides. The white paint was long gone, eaten away by salt, replaced by the fuzzy green of algae. A broken antenna jutted into the water like a snapped bone. For something that had been sealed for decades, there was still faint light glowing from a few portholes. Weak, yellow, like tired eyes. "Visual contact," I said. "Looks stable. You see the main access hatch?" Morales asked. "Yeah, port side, midships." I kicked toward it. Silt puffed up around the base of the habitat where it met the seafloor. The smell reaches you even through a full-face mask sometimes. Thick water has a taste. Here was metal, old oil, and something like fish left too long in a bucket. The main hatch was a circular door with faded stenciling. Pelagic Adaptation Facility, USN. Above it, someone had painted a name in flaking black letters. Keys Station. I swallowed hard. Hull looks intact, I said. No obvious breaches. We've got positive pressure topside, Morales replied. Systems are running off the portable generator we dropped last week. You just need to spin the wheel and go in. Interior atmosphere's been purged. That's what they told you, I said. Doesn't mean it smells good. Stop whining and open the door, old man. I smiled despite myself. Copy that. I grabbed the wheel on the hatch. Even through my gloves, I could feel where the paint had been gouged deeply, long strips down to bare metal. 5 parallel grooves, like someone had dragged their fingernails against it again and again, hard enough to bite in. My light caught similar marks around the frame. A ring of desperation. Morales, I said, my voice a little flatter. You seeing these? Jesus, he muttered in my ear a second later. What the hell did they keep in there, a tiger? Tiger with fingers, I said. He laughed once, brittle. Probably just corrosion patterns, man. Open up. Corrosion patterns don't move in clean sets of 5. But I didn't argue. I turned the wheel. The steel groaned. Tiny bubbles spat out around the seals as the pressure shifted. The hatch swung inward with a slow, reluctant motion, revealing the cylindrical airlock beyond. My light cut through a space encrusted with flaking paint and droplets of condensation clinging to every surface like sweat. I stepped inside. The water sloshed around my boots, ankle deep. It supposedly pumped this place dry, but water finds its way back into everything. Metal clanged as I closed the hatch behind me. I hit the controls on the panel. Pumps whined, fighting the ocean. The water level dropped around my legs until the floor showed, rust-stained and slick. I opened the inner door. Smell hits you different in an enclosed space. It wraps around you, crawls into your sinuses, coats your tongue. Even through a mask, I could taste it. Not just mildew, not just old oil and mold and stale air. This was thick, sharp, organic, rot and disinfectant and something sour that made the back of my throat prickle. It reminded me of a fish processing plant I'd surveyed once, the one where a refrigeration line broke and a whole room of product went bad before anyone noticed. Sweet rotting meat and cold metal. Underneath, that was a note I didn't recognize. Vinegar, maybe. Acid. Wrong. The main corridor of Keys Station stretched ahead, a tubular hallway lined with pipes and cables. My footsteps on the metal grating rang loud in the stale air. Every sound came back to me twice, once as normal echo, once as something softer, dampened. Interior looks okay, I said, sweeping the light. Old posters peeled from the walls. Faded safety signs. A cracked photo of 3 men in wetsuits, grinning, their arms around each other. The whites of their eyes went bright in my beam. Copy, Mike Morales said. His voice sounded thinner in here. Remember your clock? Yeah. According to the plans, Keys Station consisted of 4 main modules. Living quarters, lab space, a tiny med bay, and a central hub with a control room. Everything else was supposed to be storage and ballast. The fact that the Navy was paying me extra hazard rates told me there would be surprises. As I moved through the habitat, I noticed subtle things that didn't match the blueprint. Bulkheads that were thicker, seams in the walls where no seams should be. Places where the sound of my bootsteps changed pitch, like the chamber beyond wasn't empty. At an intersection, the corridor turned left toward the living quarters and right toward the lab. Straight ahead, it should have dead-ended. It didn't. There was a hatch there, smaller, squatter, no label, just gray steel with more of those 5-finger gouges around its rim. Morales, I said quietly, I've got an unmarked access point at frame D9. That on your copy. A pause. Rustling papers. Negative, he said. There should be a blank wall there. You sure you're at D9? I aimed my light at the faded stenciling on the ceiling. D9. Positive. He exhaled into the mic. Could be an undocumented ballast tank. Or a storage pod. Take a quick look, yeah? If it's bigger than a broom closet, we need to know for demo planning. Professional curiosity. Liability. I heard my own mental voice saying it and ignored it. The hatch will have been painted red once. Now it was mostly bare metal and rust. My gloves slipped slightly until I tightened my grip. As I turned it, flakes of paint and something else, thin, dark, brittle, snowed down onto my wrist. I looked closer. Not paint. Bits of nail. Human. Broken off where someone had dug their fingers in and pulled until they tore. The wheel turned with a reluctant, scraping sound. The hatch popped inward, exhaling a breath of air that had been trapped down there for God knows how long. That smell. Stronger. Concentrated. Render plant. Vinegar. And something under both that made my hindbrain yell like a siren. Jesus, I muttered. My voice sounded small in the helmet. Air quality is compromised. How bad? Morales asked. You good? I'm sealed. Remember? I'm not breathing this crap. It just smells like someone bottled a slaughterhouse in the sun. I'll be quick. I stepped through. A narrow metal staircase led down at a steep angle, the treads slick with condensation. The walls on either side were painted the same institutional gray, but here the paint was shredded. Long furrows raked down in sets of 5. Some ran the entire height of the stairwell from shoulder level down to ankle. My helmet light picked out faint brownish stains caught in the gouges. Old, long dried, maybe rust, maybe not. As I descended, droplets of water pattered steadily from overhead, tapping my helmet like fingers. Somewhere deep below, something pinged. Not sonar. Not exactly. More like the echo of a hammer hit ringing along the hull. Still good, Mike? Morales asked. His voice came through as a whisper now, distorted by the structure. Yeah, I lied. Stairs going down. Not on the plans. You're pushing your time, he said. 10 minutes down already. I got it. The staircase ended in a short landing and another hatch. This one had a simple label stenciled in block letters, faded but legible under the grime. S-level observation. Smaller text below it. Authorized personnel only, Dr. Keyes. I stared at the name for a second longer than I should have. You seeing this? I asked. Feed's cutting out a bit, Morales said. Looks like another comp room to me. You okay, Mike? You sound off. Just enjoying the interior design, I said, forcing my voice steady. Going in. The wheel on this hatch turned easily. Too easily, given the rust everywhere else. The locks were already disengaged. Somebody had opened it more recently than 30 years ago. The room beyond was big, much bigger than anything that should have fit inside this station. I stepped through and my light skated over rows of metal frames bolted to the floor. The ceiling stretched up past my beam, lost in darkness. Beds, 36 of them, narrow bunks with thin mattresses, restraints hanging limp at the sides like discarded seatbelts. Stainless steel rails glinted wetly in the light. Every metal surface was scratched. The floor, the underside of the beds, the walls, a frenzy of marks, some shallow and frantic, some deep and deliberate. Nails, teeth, whatever they had. On the far wall, right where my light landed, someone had carved words into the enamel, over and over, spiraling outward from a central point until the phrases overlapped and tangled. Still hungry, still hungry, still hungry. The letters got more jagged as they spread. The writing lost its lines. Toward the edges, it turned into something barely legible, more claw-marked than script. Okay, that's Morales started, then his voice dissolved into static. A squeal cut across the channel like feedback underwater. A long, drawn-out wail of noise. Morales, I said, repeat that. Nothing, just a faint hiss, and underneath it, a rhythmic sound. Tap, 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 like someone knocking on steel from very far away. I looked at the beds. Union regs, human rights boards, Anyone with a conscience would have called this room a cell block. Each bunk had a small metal shelf beside it, a bolted-down chair, and a single overhead fixture. No privacy, no personal belongings, no windows. My light drifted. Bed 1 was empty. Bed 2, empty. Bed 3, a shape. My brain filed it as body first, because that's what you expect in an abandoned facility. A mummified corpse, maybe a skeleton, skin stretched tight as plastic wrap over bones. Limbs too long, too thin. Fingers, long, so much longer than they should be. They curved around the rail of the bed, nails thick and yellow, ridged like horn. I felt my mouth go dry, even with the mouthpiece between my teeth. Morales, I said slowly, if you can hear me, I've found 23 occupants. Repeat, human bodies present. They're not in any record I've seen. Silence. I took a half step closer, my boots clanging on the metal floor. The sound bounced up into the darkness and came back warped. The thing on the bed moved. Not a twitch, not a settling of joints. It inhaled. Skin rose and fell over its ribs in a slow, shuddering breath. The chest cavity expanded further than it should have, like something had rearranged its organs. The surface of its skin glistened, damp, as if it had just been hauled out of water. My helmet light swept up to its face. Its eyes snapped open. I flinched hard enough that my umbilical line jerked behind me. The eyes were wrong. Huge, bulging, the whites tinted a faint blue from burst vessels, pupils blown so wide they looked like slick black discs. They caught my light and bounced it back in a sharp animal shine, like a cat's, but too bright. Water beaded on its eyelashes. Its lips cracked apart. A line of drool threaded from its lower lip down onto the pillow. Its mouth opened too wide, the jaw unhinging with a crack that echoed in the room. The sound it made dug into my spine and tried to drag me backward. A wet clicking, like someone trying to talk with their mouth full of seawater. Little clacks of teeth, rapid, desperate. More beds stirred, hairless heads turning toward me, fingers tightening on rails. 36 beds, 23 of them occupied, and every single one of those occupants was waking up. They looked like men who had dried out and then been soaked again, skin too thin, veins like blue cords underneath. Their joints bulged where bone met bone, knees and elbows big and knotted, like they'd been forced to bear weight in the wrong directions for too long. Some had patches of pale, flaking skin around their necks where something like gill slits puckered open and closed slowly, drawing useless air. When they sat up, they did it wrong. Not the way a tired or injured person moves. There was no groan, no slow roll. One moment they were lying down. The next they were upright, backs bent, heads angled, like frames missing in a video. Their eyes all found me at once. My own heart hammered against my ribs so hard I felt it in my teeth. Morales, I said, voice high and thin in my own ears. Respond. Now. Static. Then faintly, Ike. Signal breaking. You okay? No, I said. I'm not fucking okay. The creature closest to me, closest to being human, my brain tried to call it, slid off the bed. It didn't stand. It didn't need to. Its arms were as long as its legs now. It hit the floor on all fours with a sharp clang of bone on metal and began to move. That skittering sound. I had heard it before in smaller spaces, crabs over whole plates, rats in vents. This was that sound, amplified and sped up. Nails, no claws, scraping, hands and feet slapping in rapid bursts as they twitched forward. The others followed. They didn't move in unison exactly, but there was something synchronized about the way their heads jerked. Fast, bird-like motions as they tracked me. Their mouths hung open, strings of thick saliva swinging with every movement, glistening in my light. One of them made a sound that was almost a word. A rasp of air past dry vocal cords. Grai. That broke whatever fragile pause had kept me still. I ran. I turned and bolted for the hatch, boots ringing on the floor, umbilical line whipping behind me. The air in my suit felt suddenly too hot, too thick. My breathing punched in and out fast, loud. Behind me, the skittering exploded. I didn't look back. Not then. If I looked back, I think I would have frozen. The hatch to the staircase loomed ahead, darker rectangle in the dark. I grabbed the wheel, spun it, threw the door open, and flung myself through. Something grabbed my ankle. My body kept going, but my leg snapped to a halt. I pitched forward, the world turning sideways. My helmet smashed against the edge of a step, a crack glancing across the corner of my vision where the faceplate flexed. Stars burst behind my eyes. Water droplets sprayed from the stairwell walls, spinning in slow arcs. I looked back, its arm wrapped completely around my lower leg, fingers overlapping on the other side of my boot. Those long, knob joints flexed within human torque as it squeezed. Up close, I could see more detail than I ever wanted. It had been a man once. The ghost of human bone structure was still there under the distortion. Cheekbones, jawline, but the skin had thinned and pulled tight over everything, so translucent I could see a map of blue veins underneath. The eyes filled most of its face, black and bottomless, reflecting my own pale, terrified face back at me in miniature. Its nose had flattened. Its lips had receded, pulling back to reveal teeth that were too numerous, like a shark's in miniature rows. As I watched, its throat convulsed. A gush of thick, cloudy fluid ran out of the corner of its mouth, down onto my boot. The smell hit a half-second later, even through my sealed system. Hot, acid, old bile, and something chemical underneath, like antiseptic and battery acid. Its jaw opened wider, until the hinge creaked. Hungry, it whispered, voice dry and papery, like dead leaves dragged over concrete. So hungry, my body moved before my brain did. I kicked, hard. The sole of my other boot smashed into its face. I felt something give under the impact, cartilage, bone, who knows. There was a crunch like breaking crab shell. It didn't let go. It recoiled just enough that its grip loosened for a fraction of a second. I jerked my leg, twisting hard. The sole of my boot slipped free, leaving rubber streaked with some of its fluid. Another one was halfway down the stairs behind it now, head shoved sideways against the wall because too many joints bent the wrong way. Its fingers scrabbled for purchase on the metal, claws shrieking across steel. I scrambled upward on hands and knees, boots slipping on damp treads, helmet banging against the low ceiling. The umbilical line snagged for a second on something behind me and jerked me back, hard, before sliding free with a squeal. "Mike, talk to me," Morales shouted in my ear, his voice cutting through the roaring in my head. "Hostiles," I gasped. "People, things down here. You need to." My words dissolved as my foot slipped and I slammed my shin into a step. Pain flared white. "Fuck, abort. Abort now. What are you talking about? You're alone down there." "The fuck I am," I wheezed. The hatch at the top of the stairs loomed. I threw myself at it, spun the wheel with raw panic strength, and slammed it shut behind me as soon as I dragged my line through. The wheel squealed under my hands. For a half second, there was silence. Then something hit the other side, not with fists, with multiple points at once. A slap of limbs. The rapid, frantic scraping of nails tearing at steel. The whole door shuddered. Little beads of rust fell from the seams. I didn't wait to see if it would hold. The main corridor of Keys Station stretched ahead like a nightmare funhouse. Every shadow looked like it held movement. Every drip of condensation sounded like fingers. I could have gone back to the main hatch, to the airlock, and the way out. That would have been the smart play. They were between me and that exit. I saw them before my brain recognized what I was seeing. 3 figures down the corridor where it bent toward the living quarters, half lit by my flickering helmet light. They moved in that broken way, too fast between one position and the next, like someone skipping through frames. 1 second they were 30 yards away. Blink, they were halfway, heads cocked at impossible angles, eyes fixed on me. They didn't run. Not exactly. They twitched forward in bursts, hands and feet hitting the deck, then walls, then ceiling, using every surface like a spider. Their nails left long gouges in the metal as they went. The one in the middle wore something around its neck, a cracked plastic badge on a rotted lanyard. As it jerked closer, it swung up and caught my light. A faded U.S. Navy volunteer logo barely visible under grime. Beneath that, a year, 1969. They've been down here for 50 plus years. Their eyes never left me. Their jaws worked silently, teeth clicking together in little chewing motions. The air felt thick with their smell now. Vetrot, old sweat, salt. My options shrank to a needlepoint. To my left, a hatch-marked lab. To my right, control hub and emergency exit, starboard escape trunk. They were between me and the primary hatch. Maybe they didn't know about the emergency trunk. Maybe they did. If I hesitated, I'd find out the hard way. I bolted right. The skittering noise behind me spiked. I heard claws hitting walls, something hitting the ceiling hard enough to dent it. My umbilical line tried to snag in a pipe bracket. I ripped it free without slowing, feeling the insulation scrape. The control room door ahead stood ajar, one hinge sagging. Beyond it, I caught a washed-out glow. Emergency lights, faint and red. I dove through, shoulder slamming into the doorway hard enough to make my vision blur. Panels on the walls flickered, dead screens, and analog gauges, all layered in dust and condensation. On the far side of the room stood a vertical tube with a circular hatch at its base. Letters around it: starboard escape, manual trunk, above 15 m only. Mike, your depth, Morales started. No time, I snapped, bringing the trunk online. It hasn't been tested. Neither have they. I spun the wheel on the trunk hatch. The metal rattled, stiff after decades, but it moved. The hatch hissed open, revealing a cramped cylinder barely wide enough for my suited body. Behind me, claws scraped the control room bulkhead. I didn't look back. I squeezed into the trunk, hauling my umbilical in with me, knees jamming against the curved wall. The air tasted stale and metallic even through the mask. I yanked the hatch shut and spun the wheel until my arms burned. The last glimpse I got through the narrowing gap was a pale, long-fingered hand curling around the door frame, nails tearing little curls of metal from it. The hatch sealed. A second later, something smashed into it from outside. Then again, harder. The whole trunk rang like a bell. For a moment, I thought they'd punch right through. Panels above me creaked. The ladder leading up rattled against its brackets. Tiny flakes of rust snowed down, stippling my helmet. "Mike," Morales shouted. "Talk to me. Your vitals are spiking." "Escape trunk," I grunted, shoving one glove up to find the manual release lever in the dark. "If this thing blows, pull me in and dump my ass in a recompression chamber ASAP." "You're below rating for that trunk," he said, panic creeping into his voice despite the static. "It's only safe if you're above 15 meters. "I know that," I snapped. "I also know what's trying to get in here." Silence. Then, "Pull the lever then." "On my mark." 3, 2, 1. I didn't wait for go. I yanked. The world lurched. There was a concussive bang as explosive bolts fired. For a second, everything went weightless. My stomach tried to climb into my throat. Then the trunk shot upward like a bottle rocket, pushed by a screaming column of expanding gas. Water slammed against the outside. The sound was deafening, the whole tube vibrating as if it would shake apart. I clung to the ladder rungs, my body weightless, and then crushed in alternating pulses. My depth gauge spun. 70 meters. 60. 50. Too fast. "Mike, you're ascending like a goddamn missile," Morales yelled. "You're gonna..." His voice warped, stretched, then snapped back. My perception went sideways as pressure dropped. My joints felt like someone was driving ice picks into them. Tiny bubbles fizzed in my vision. "Better." Then, down there, I grunted. The banging on the hatch below had stopped. Either the trunk had left them behind, or they'd found another way out. a thought I didn't need in my head. Dark water flashed past the small porthole above me. A second later, the tube broke the surface with a violent splash. Light, real light, gray and harsh, flooded in as the top hatch blew open, spraying cold air into my face. Hand grabbed me, strong hands, hauling me up and out, dumping me onto the deck like a sack. The sky spun overhead. The boat's mast cut lines through the clouds. Gulls wheeled, their cries thin and unreal after the muffled underwater world. "Get his helmet," Morales shouted. The clamps popped. Cold air hit my face like a slap. Diesel fumes, salt spray, the constant slap of waves against the hull. I gulped it in like a drowning man. "What the fuck happened down there?" Morales demanded. His eyes were big, the whites showing all around the irises. "Your camera cut out. 1 minute you're walking down a hallway. Next your depth gauge is rocketing up and you're screaming at me about hostiles." My throat worked. No sound came out at first. My head throbbed with a dull, insistent ache. Pins and needles crawled under my skin. Bodies, I managed finally. Living, or something like it. Morales shot a look at Harlan, who'd come out of the wheelhouse. The captain's face was carved stone. "Huh," Harlan said. "Huh," I snapped. "I nearly got fucking eaten by your little obsolete asset. And all you have to say is..." He chewed on that for a second, eyes on the churned water where the escape trunk floated, half submerged. "How many?" he asked. "Beds." 36, I said. "Occupants 23 that I saw moving." The number lodged in my brain with cold clarity. "They're not supposed to exist, Harlan. They're wrong. Too long. Eyes." I shut my mouth. The more detail I gave, the less sane I sounded. "Could be narcosis," Morales said softly. "Nitrogen can mess with your head down there. You know that." "I know what nitrogen narcosis feels like," I snapped. "That wasn't narcosis." He opened his mouth, closed it again. His gaze flicked down to my hands. I followed it. My fingers were shaking so hard I could barely keep them still. Not just from adrenaline. My joints already ached, deep in the knuckles. "You're coming up too fast," he said. "We need to get you in the chamber. Now." Harlan clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Do your job, kid. I'll call it in." "Call who in?" I asked, but he was already walking back toward the wheelhouse, radio in hand. They shut me in the portable recompression chamber for 6 hours. Just me, metal walls, the hiss of valves, and the sound of my own breathing. Time stretches in there. Every creak of the hull sounds like something tapping to get in. At one point, maybe an hour in, I swear I heard it. That same pattern of knocks I'd heard through the station. 3 soft taps, a pause, then 2 more. From somewhere beyond the chamber wall. Talp, talp, talp. Pause. Talp, talp. "Morales," I said over the intercom. "You hear that?" "Hear what?" he replied. His voice was distant, filtered. "Knocking. Negative. You're alone in there. Just you and your thoughts." I almost believed him. By the time they brought me back to surface pressure, my head felt like it had been wrung out. Harlan didn't look me in the eyes when he opened the hatch. "There's a helicopter on the way," he said. "Navy. They're taking your recordings and your report. After that, you're clear." "Clear." I repeated. "You did your job," he said. "You found the hazard. They'll take it from here." What he meant was, forget it. Walk away. Cash your check. Don't ask questions. On the flight back to the mainland, I stared out the tiny window at the speck of a boat shrinking below, then at the patch of sea that hid Keys Station. The ocean there looked just like everywhere else, flat, gray, indifferent. But my tongue tasted like salt and metal, and the back of my throat wouldn't stop itching. I didn't tell anyone what I'd really seen. I said the structure was unstable. I said there were signs of biological contamination. I said it was too dangerous to send another diver down until they'd sealed it from topside. They nodded, stone-faced. A guy in a Navy windbreaker with no name tag thanked me for my thorough work. He took the hard drive with my dive footage and put it into a briefcase with a little click like that was that. They didn't ask about the scratches, or the beds, or the carved wall. They already knew. I went back to my life, to my little apartment over the marina, with its peeling paint and thin walls in view of massed forest through the salty glass. I told myself I'd dodged a bullet. Got a scare, sure, but I'd gotten out. The first night, I woke up 3 times thinking I heard water slapping under my bed. Just the old pipes, I told myself. Just the harbor. My place always sounds like a hull. That's why I'd rented it in the first place. The second night, I dreamed about the corridor, about walking toward that unmarked hatch again, hearing the scratching on the other side before I opened it. Except in the dream, when I pulled the door, the ocean rushed in and filled the station, and I opened my mouth to breathe it in, and it felt right. I woke up gagging, my throat raw. I blamed the chamber. Pressure can do weird things to your head. I told myself that over and over. Then the hunger started. At first, I just felt hollow, like I'd burned more calories fighting my way out of that station than I thought. Normal enough. I made myself an ungodly breakfast that morning. 6 eggs, half a loaf of toast, a pile of bacon. I ate until my stomach hurt. An hour later, the ache was gone. I was starving. Not could use a snack. Not, I skipped lunch, guess I'm hungry. Gnawing, painful, insistent hunger like someone had reached inside me and scraped the lining of my stomach with a knife. I ordered pizza, 2 large pies, extra cheese, extra meat. The delivery kid gave me a look when he saw it was just me. Party? He asked. Something like that, I said. I ate both. Every slice, every crust, licked grease off my fingers. Half an hour later, the hollow feeling crept back in, heavier. By the end of that first week, I'd put away enough food for a family of 4 and still caught myself staring at my neighbor's grocery bags like an animal sizing up prey. I went to a doctor on the Navy's dime. They drew blood, asked about my dye profile, checked my weight. You've actually dropped 7 pounds since your last physical, the doc said, frowning at the chart. You feel hungry, you said. All the time, I said. Like I'm starving, even after I eat. She asked about stress, depression, trauma, suggested it might be psychological. Gave me a pamphlet on PTSD and a card for some base counselor. It could be a transient metabolic response to the dive and the chamber time, she said. Your body went through a shock. Sometimes appetite spikes. Just make sure you're eating balanced meals, stay hydrated, and try to keep a food diary for a couple weeks. If it doesn't settle, we'll run more tests. Balanced meals. I repeated, trying not to laugh. Sure. On the way out, I noticed my reflection in a polished stainless panel in the hallway. For a second, I didn't recognize myself. My eyes look a little too big. Not dramatically, just enough that the whites showed more around the irises. My pupils seemed blown, even under the bright fluorescence. I chalked it up to bad lighting and a brain full of horror images. That night, I woke up with my jaw aching. Hard, throbbing pain right at the hinges like I'd been clenching it for hours. My tongue tasted like salt. The glass of water on my bedside table was empty. I didn't remember drinking it. I went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. I don't remember deciding to do it. I just remember standing there in the cold light, door wide open, staring at the plastic wrap pack of raw salmon I'd bought for sushi a few days back and never used. I tore it open with my fingers and ate it standing there. No soy, no rise, just thick, slippery slices of flesh, cold and soft between my teeth, tasting of ocean and iron. When it was gone, I realized I'd cut my gums in 3 places. My teeth had sunk deeper than they should have. Farther back, the hunger didn't ease. Not really. It just shifted like it had moved from my stomach into my bones. My joints ached constantly, a deep heat in my knees and knuckles and elbows. I took ibuprofen by the handful. It didn't touch it. A week after the dive, I noticed something else. I was lying on the couch, watching some mindless show to try to drown out my thoughts when my phone slipped from my hand. I bent to pick it up and my fingers looked wrong, longer. I held my hand up in front of my face. From base to tip, each finger looked maybe a 1/4 inch longer than in my memory. The joints seemed slightly swollen, the knuckles more prominent. The nails were thicker, too, with faint ridges running their length. I told myself it was in my head. that you don't actually remember the exact proportions of your own fingers, that my brain was pulling shapes from the things I'd seen underwater and pasting them onto my body. That lasted until I tried to type. I sat down at my desk to email a client and kept hitting 2 keys at once. I resized the keyboard angle, adjusted my chair. Didn't help. My hands didn't fit the muscle memory anymore. 2 days after that, I dropped my beer bottle in the shower. Don't ask why I had a beer in the shower. It was a long day. It rolled into the corner and jammed against the drain, neck pointing straight down. Water beat against it, splashing back over my feet. I watched the neck slowly fill. The green glass distorted the view into the drain, twisted silver of the metal grate, little black hole in the center. For a second, I saw an eye down there, huge and dark, staring up through a circle of rust, the way their eyes had stared up at me from the beds. I slammed my heel down on the bottle, shattering it. Glass bit into the skin above my ankle. Blood welled up, thin and pink under the spray. I told myself it was a trick of light. Refraction, nothing more. That night, I heard it again. Talp, talp, talp. Pause. Talp, talp. Not from the harbor. Not from under the floorboards. From the pipes in my wall. The knocks traveled along the copper and PVC like a crude sonar. They came in sets, evenly spaced, repeating every minute or so. Talp, talp, talp. Pause. Talp, talp. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, breathing shallowly, and listened. It went on for 2 hours. If you live near the water long enough, you get used to ship sounds. Creaks, groans, the distant thump of a hull hitting a wave, the slow moan of ropes in the wind. The human brain is good at classifying those noises and shoving them into a drawer marked not important. These sounds didn't go in that drawer. They crawled into the back of my skull and sat there, pulsing. The next morning, when I brushed my teeth, I spit into the sink and the color wasn't right. Not pink, not red. Thin, whitish strands in the foam, like diluted milk. It reminded me of what had run from that thing's mouth when it grabbed my leg. I rinsed until my gums hurt. By the end of the second week, I'd lost 15 pounds, according to the cheap scale in my bathroom, despite eating like a linebacker. My belt hung loose. My cheeks looked a little more hollow. My eyes, though, they were too bright, too sharp. People noticed. Jesus, Mike, Morales said when I stopped by the dock to pick up some gear I'd left on Harlan's boat. You look like shit. Thanks, I said. You talked to the doc again? Yeah. She says I'm fine. I shrugged. Probably just stress. He hesitated. I got a copy of your dive footage. My stomach clenched. Ow. Guy in IT owes me a favor, he said. I wanted to see what freaked you out so bad. See if maybe I could piece together what happened before the feed cut. And I asked. He looked away, out at the harbor, where a cargo ship's hull loomed like a cliff beyond the marina. I watched it 3 times, he said. Everything looks normal. Normal, I repeated. Yeah, corridor, hatch, stairs. Then you open the door to that room, and it's just static. Snow, for about 10 minutes. Then we get video back with you sprinting down another corridor. That's it. The audio, it's just your breathing and garbled shouting. No scratching, no voices. I demanded. No. He shook his head. Nothing I can make out. Maybe the system glitched from the pressure or the humidity. I don't know. All I know is if I didn't trust you, I'd think you panicked in an empty room. I laughed once too loud. I panicked, all right, but it wasn't empty. Morales hesitated, then put a hand on my shoulder. Look, man, you want to back you up if you make a formal report? Say the equipment failed, that we need another look before they scuttle the place? I can do that. A weird feeling crawled up my spine at the idea of going back down there. Half revulsion, half something else. Like a thirst. Let them seal it, I said. My voice sounded raw. The less anyone goes near that place, the better. He nodded slowly, but he didn't look convinced. That afternoon, purely by accident, I drove past the Navy Yard where they staged the decommissioning stuff. I tell myself it was an accident, anyway. That I didn't take the long way home on purpose, so I'd pass the gate. Through the chain link, I saw a row of trucks and a crane. On one of the trailers sat something cylindrical, wrapped in tarps and chained down tight. The tarp flapped in the wind, just enough for me to see a curve of gray metal beneath, and a glimpse of stenciled letters. The starboard escape trunk. They'd hauled it up. Behind it, on a flatbed, sat another shape. Bigger, squatter. The angle was bad, but for a second I thought I saw a familiar curve of hull and a row of sealed portholes under plastic. Key station was coming up in pieces. They were going to cut it apart, seal it, and sink it somewhere deeper, somewhere safe. The thought made my skin crawl, and at the same time, something in my chest eased just a little. If it's gone, you can't go back, I told myself. That night, the pipes knocked again. Top, top, top. Pause. Top, top. This time, there was a second sound with it. A faint wet scraping, like something dragging long nails through water inside the walls. And underneath it all, so low I almost missed it, a single clean ping. High, pure, like a sonar pulse reflected from something very close. I sat up in bed, heart racing, and for the first time, I realized the hunger wasn't just physical anymore. It wasn't just in my gut or my bones. It was in my head. It wasn't just food I wanted. It was depth, dark, crushing, endless water. I told myself I was just tired, that if I slept hard enough, the hunger in my head would quiet down. It didn't. Next day, I tried to do something normal. Walk down to the docks, grab coffee from the little shack that sells terrible pastries and industrial-strength brew, sit on a piling, and watch the fishing boats churn out past the breakwater. I figured if I surrounded myself with the usual water noises, slap of waves on hulls, gulls screaming, engine rumble, it would drown out the other sound. It didn't. I stood there with a paper cup in my hand, staring past the marina at the open water. The sky was a washed-out blue, the ocean dark and flat, little white caps chopping across it. Somewhere under that was the place I'd almost died. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like mud. I dumped 3 sugar packets in and choked it down anyway. "Hey, you alive in there?" a voice said behind me. I didn't have a turn to know it was Morales. I knew his voice better than my own at this point. When someone sits in your ear during a dive, they get wired straight into your nervous system. "Define alive," I said. He stepped up beside me, the boards creaking under his boots. The smell of engine oil and cheap soap came with him. "Harlan said you were ghosting his calls." "I've been busy," I lied. "Doing what?" "You're not on a job." He wasn't wrong. My calendar was a graveyard. I turned down 2 surveys and ignored an email about a potential rig decommissioning. The idea of going down in open water again made my skin crawl and my teeth ache in equal measure. "You know," I said, thinking, eating everything in sight, watching my fingers get longer. I held up my hand. He frowned. "Dude, that's just lighting," he said, but there was a tiny tremor in his voice. I turned my wrist, letting the sun hit the joints. The knuckles bulge a little now, skin shiny and tight over them. The nails were thicker, a pale yellow at the edges. "You know Keys?" I asked suddenly. "Who?" "Doctor. Ansel Keys. Minnesota starvation experiment, 1940s. He blinked. I didn't think this was going to turn into a book club. "What are you talking about?" "They took a bunch of pacifists, right? Men who wouldn't fight. Starved them under control conditions. Watched what it did to them." I swallowed. My mouth was dry. They documented everything. Obsession with food. Personality changes. Self-mutilation. One guy cut off his fingers. Morales watched the water, jaw tight. "Okay, Key Station," I said. They didn't just pull that name out of a hat. They built that place on top of his work. They wanted to know what happens if you combine deep isolation, starvation, pressure. How far you can push adaptation before something breaks. He rubbed the back of his neck. "You're scaring the shit out of me, man." "Good," I said. "You should be scared." We stood there a while. A big trawler chugged past, dragging a smell of diesel and old fish. Its hull cut a deep V through the water, lifting a swell that made the dock rise and fall beneath us. For a moment, right as the wave passed under, my ears popped. Hard. Not like from altitude, like from pressure. My vision shimmered for a second, flickering as if someone had turned the brightness up and down. Did you feel that? I asked. Feel what? I shook my head. Nothing. He'd never believe the ocean breathed different for a second. Morales blew out a breath. Look, I came to warn you. They're moving fast. Navy's got a salvage crew out there right now. Harlan's been ferrying stuff back and forth. They're cutting keys apart, welding on new plating, and prepping to sink the whole mess in the deep trench. Out of sight, out of mind. Sealing them in, I said softly. He nodded. Something like that. You're probably happy, right? Monsters in a box. My tongue felt thick. They're not in a box, I said. They're in water. That's not a cage. That's home. He stared at me. You hearing yourself? I laughed once, short and ugly. Yeah, I hear it. Mike. He shifted, stepped in front of me, so I had to look at him. Whatever happened down there, it's over. You got out. You're topside. You're still you. The lies stacked up between us like bulkheads. I didn't say, I'm not sure I'm still me. Instead, I said, how long have we known each other? 6 years, he said. In 6 years, have you ever seen me eat raw fish out of a plastic tray at 3 in the morning? He tried for a joke. You've made some questionable diner stops, but this morning, I said, cutting him off. I woke up with a craving for seawater and protein, and I ate half a pound of raw cod like it was candy. I'm not talking sushi. I took it out of the wrapping and stuffed it in my face. I only stopped when I bit my own tongue. He grimaced. That is nasty. I didn't even like fish that much, I said. Now, I walk past the market and I smell the ice and the brine and the blood, and my mouth waters so hard it hurts. I look at those big tuna hanging and I think I could eat that, all of it right now. I just need to open my jaw enough. Morales swallowed. You're freaking me out, man. Good, I said again. He looked down at my leg, at the faint blue bruise still visible under my pant leg where that thing had grabbed me. Maybe it did something to you when it touched you, he said quietly. Maybe there was some kind of pathogen or chemical. You should go to a real hospital, off base, not the Navy docks, and tell them what. I said, hi, Doc. I shook hands with an underwater ghoul, and now I want to eat the ocean. He didn't laugh this time. We argued then, stupidly, because it was easier than talking about sonar and hunger and what waits in the dark. He wanted to go back to the station with another team, see for himself, because of course he did. I wanted him as far away from that place as possible. You don't believe me? Stay the fuck away anyway, I snapped. Call in sick. Quit. Burn your dive license. I don't care. Just don't take a job that has the word keys in it. And leave you to deal with this alone, he shot back. That's not happening. It's already happening, I said. You're just not catching up to it. He walked away eventually, pissed off, shoulders tight. I watched him go and thought irrationally about how much meat was on his bones, how many calories. That scared me more than anything in Keys Station. By the 3rd week, the changes weren't subtle anymore. I kept a notebook like the doctor suggested. Weight in the morning, weight at night. Food intake, symptom check. It read like the logs from a failing ship. Day 17, down 12 pounds total. 86,000 plus calories. Fingers ache, knees hot, ears ringing. Day 19, down 14 pounds. Woke up at 2 o'clock with leg cramps, so bad I screamed. Sounded like hull stress. Neighbor banged on wall, told me to shut the hell up. Day 20, down 15 pounds. Finger length increased approximate 3 to 4 millimeters since last week. Nails thicker. Jaw clicks when I chew, like something's trying to unhinge. So hungry I thought about eating the cat by the dumpster. I stared at that last line for a long time before underlining it and writing an O under it, hard enough to tear the paper. I started sticking recipes up on the walls without planning to. Dive stew recipes. Calorie-dense ones from old Navy manuals. Fish chowder, turtle soup, pemmican bars. High-protein rations. Stuff I'd seen in passing years ago and never cared about. Now I trawled forums and scanned PDFs and printed them off. Pages and pages of measurements and ingredients and instructions. The kitchen wall disappeared under them first, then the hallway, then the small empty space above my bed. When I finished a meal, I'd find myself licking the plate clean before I even realized I was doing it, tongue scraping up every last bit of sauce, gums bumping against ceramic. One night, I woke up standing in front of my own fridge, door open, light glaring in my eyes, fingers digging into a leftover roast chicken so hard I snapped the bones. I was sucking the marrow out before my conscious brain kicked back online. I staggered back, greasy and shaking. My reflection in the stainless steel door was barely recognizable. Hollow cheeks, big eyes that gleamed too bright, hair hanging limp with sweat. "Stop," I told myself out loud. "Stop. That's enough." My stomach growled so loud it drowned the words out. I went back to the doctor. A different one, civilian this time, in a clinic 20 miles inland because I thought, stupidly, that distance from the water might mean distance from whatever was happening to me. She ran more tests. Thyroid panel, blood sugar, hormone levels, parasites. She frowned at the results, typed something into her computer, frowned more. "Everything's within normal ranges," she said finally, turning the screen toward me like she wanted me to argue with the numbers. "You're losing weight?" "Yes, but there's no sign of malabsorption. No tumors. No infections we can see. Your blood work is boring." "I'm burning through food like a furnace with a hole in it," I said. "Eat, you starve." "I eat more, I starve harder." "That doesn't bother you." "Of course it does," she said, a little defensive. "Medically, we call what you're describing hyperphagia. Excessive hunger. It can be associated with a variety of conditions, some psychiatric, some neurological. You mentioned a traumatic event recently. I almost drowned in a haunted science project and got grabbed by something that shouldn't exist. Yeah." She smiled the polite, strained smile of someone used to dealing with vets who say weird things. Near-death experiences can absolutely trigger extreme physiological responses, she said. Fight or flight that never quite shuts off. Your body might be reacting as if it's still in danger, hoarding calories, demanding more. It's possible a course of therapy could. "It's not in my head," I said flatly. "I'm not saying it is," she lied. "I'm saying you've been through something deeply stressful in an environment that already stresses the body." "Sometimes I can feel my bones changing," I said. I heard knocking in the pipes that matched sonar patterns I heard at 250 feet. My joints feel like they're trying to unscrew themselves. "I don't want a fucking therapist. I want you to tell me I have a tapeworm the size of a garden hose." She looked at my hands then. Really looked. "Your fingers," she murmured. "Yeah," I said. She touched the back of my left hand with one cool fingertip, pressing lightly around the knuckles. "Any injuries?" she asked. "Breaks? Dislocations?" "Not unless you count when one of those things almost tore my leg off." She didn't laugh. "I can refer you to a specialist," she said finally. "Endocrinology, maybe rheumatology. In the meantime, keep tracking your intake and weight. If you start feeling faint, if you pass out, if you notice any swelling in your abdomen, I want you in an ER immediately." "Understood." I nodded, even though we both knew I wasn't going to drive to a hospital next time I got dizzy. I was going to walk toward the nearest body of water and listen. On the way back to the marina, I passed the Navy Yard again. They put up new fencing around the salvage area. Fresh razor wire glinted in the sun. Signs every 20 feet, restricted. No unauthorized entry. U.S. government property. Inside, I could see more pieces of Key Station laid out on the asphalt like a dismembered whale. Curve hull sections under tarps. Bulky modules with pipes and valves sticking out, all capped and tagged. Welders and hoods moved like insects over one of the larger sections, sparks spraying into the salty air. Near the far fence line, a group of men in coveralls were guiding a crate into the back of a truck. The crate was long and low, reinforced with steel bands. As they tilted it, something inside slid with a dull, wet thud. One of the workers swore, staggering. "Careful," a supervisor yelled. "That's live biohazard until it's sealed." Biohazard. They brought something up. My fingers clamped on the steering wheel hard enough to make the plastic creak. For a second, I picture myself turning the car, driving right through the gate, smashing past the guards, wrenching the back of that truck open to see what was inside, to see if any of the bunks were empty. I drove on instead. My heart thudded. I could taste metal in my mouth again. That night, I dreamed of depth. Not as a diver, not even as me. I dreamed from down there. Cold all around, pressure a constant hand on skin. Metal above, thin and humming. Water beyond with its endless slow currents. And beneath it all, a hunger like a tide. In the dream, I knew the exact shape of Keys Station without needing lights. Every corridor, every scratch in the paint. I slithered along the ceiling, fingers hooked into grooves I'd made 100 times. I dropped down to a bed and curled my 2 long limbs around my chest and waited. I smelled something new in the water that seeped through the hull. Me. When I jerked awake, my throat hurt like I'd been swallowing salt. The sheet was soaked, not just with sweat, with something thicker. My pillow smelled like the inside of the station. Rot and vinegar and antiseptic. I stumbled to the bathroom and flipped on the light. For a second, I didn't see myself. Something pale hunched over the sink. Skin stretched over bone. Eyes too big, jaw hanging slightly open. Strings of saliva glistening against the porcelain. Then it blinked, and I realized it was just me. The whites of my eyes were shot through with spiderwebs of red. My pupils were huge, swallowing almost all the color. I leaned close, fingers gripping the edge of the sink. My lower jaw shifted when I pressed it. Not much, just a little too much give, like the ligaments had loosened. When I opened my mouth, it went farther than it should have. Click! I closed it. The bones made that tiny click as they seated. My throat worked. I could feel something in my neck, a tightness on both sides. I turned my head and saw faint lines under the skin running from just below my ears toward my collarbones. 2 pairs of subtle indentations, perfectly parallel. I pressed them. I gasped. Water sensation rushed up into my sinuses, my ears. The room tilted sideways. For a second, I was back in the station, in that room, lungs burning with air that wasn't feeding me. I'm fucked, I whispered to my reflection. The thing in the mirror whispered it back. After that, I stopped pretending this was going to go away. I stopped going inland. I stayed in the marina, in my apartment over the water, where the boards always smelled faintly of brine and mold and bilge. I told myself it was because I wanted to hear if the pipes knocked again. Really, it was because the idea of being more than a couple 100 yards from the ocean made me restless, itchy. My skin crawled when I tried to sleep inland. I spent one night on a friend's couch as a test, and ended up walking back to the harbor at 4 a.m., hands jammed in my jacket pockets, breath fogging, just to stand on the pier and listen to the black water. It talked to me, not in words, in rhythms, in the slap of little waves under the planks, the creak of mooring lines, the distant thrum of a ship's engine. Underneath all that, I heard pings, soft ones at first, so faint I thought I imagined them, then clearer, at odd intervals, not the steady beat of a survey sonar or a depth sounder. Each one felt like a finger tapping the inside of my skull. Ping, ping. If I go back out there, it stops, a little voice said from somewhere under my breastbone. If I go down, I'll understand. I'll feel full. I won't be alone. I argue with myself. Out loud, sometimes. You go back, you don't come up, I told the empty room. You've seen what that does to a person. They're not people anymore. They're adapted, twisted. It's a trap. The hunger didn't care. One afternoon, my neighbor from 2 doors down cornered me in the hallway. Middle-aged guy, retired dock worker, always smelled like cigarettes and coffee. Hey Mike, he said, you okay? I forced a smile. Define okay. He chuckled, then sobered. You're looking thin, man. Like chemo thin. You getting checked out? Working on it, I lied. You've been banging around at all hours too, he said. Thought you were gonna come through the floor last night. I was asleep by 10. He gave me a look. Then it was someone else yelling about being hungry at 2 in the morning, he said. Sounded like you, though. I swallowed. Saw the bad dreams, I guess. He hesitated, then clapped my shoulder. You need anything, you ask, yeah? Little community here. Gotta watch out for each other. The place where his hand had touched me burned. Not painfully, pleasantly, like heat spreading through my skin. The smell of him, salt, old sweat, tobacco, rushed into my sinuses. For a split second, I wondered how many calories were in him. Yeah, I said, stepping back so fast he blinked. Thanks, I'm good. I shut the door and leaned against it, shaking. I went into the kitchen and ate everything in the fridge. Cold noodles, cheese, half a jar of peanut butter with a spoon. It didn't help. The next night, I tested myself. High tide comes in at 3 in the morning sometimes, slipping quietly into the harbor while the town sleeps. That night, I woke up a few minutes before 3 with my heart pounding and my skin buzzing, like something had blown a horn underwater and the vibration had reached the pilings. I pulled on a hoodie and went downstairs barefoot, the boards cold under my soles. The air outside was damp and cold, fog hanging low over the water like breath. The boats shifted restlessly in their berths. Lines creaked. A mast clanged softly. I walked down the dock. At the end, the harbor opened out. The black water beyond the breakwater looked like it went on forever. Somewhere far out, a ship horn moaned, long and lonely. I knelt at the edge of the dock. The boards were slick with condensation. My fingertips slid a little as I curled them over the side. The smell rising from below was strong. Salt, algae, fuel. Don't, I whispered to myself. I leaned forward anyway. For a second, my reflection stared back from the dark surface. Funny how the mind edits. It took out the worst. In the floating reflection, my eyes just looked tired, not huge. My jaw looked normal. That could have been any sleep-deprived dock rat staring back. Then the water around my reflection shivered. Not from wind. There was no wind. A circle of ripples spread outward as if something had surfaced just below my face. Tap, tap, tap. Something went against the underside of the dock. The vibrations traveled into my hands, up my arms. Pause. Talp, talp. Fuck you, I whispered. My reflection's lips moved with mine. In the ripples, for one heartbeat-long moment, my face wasn't alone. Other faces crowded onto the surface. Pale, wide-eyed, teeth showing. Their skin blurred by the water, their eyes huge and black. The reflections were wrong, offset, like the angle was just a little too far below. I jerked back so hard I landed on my ass. The boards rattled. The rope cleat dug into my palm. Behind my ribs, something howled, a high, thin, keening hunger that wanted me to slide forward. Let gravity take me. Let the water close over my head. I scrambled to my feet and stumbled back to the apartment, not trusting my legs. After that, I stopped going out on the dock at night. Didn't matter. The water came to me. The pipes knocked every night now, not just sometimes. The pattern changed. Sometimes it was slow, thoughtful tapping, like something feeling its way along the plumbing. Sometimes it was frantic scratching, nails skittering across copper. Once, lying in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, I heard water gurgle in the wall. Not the usual rush from a neighbor's shower. This was slower, thicker, like something squeezing itself through two tight pipes. A drop of water hit my forehead. I wiped it away, annoyed, and felt damp plaster above. The drip didn't smell like rust or mold or chlorine. It smelled like Keys Station. I checked the ceiling in the morning. No stan, no dan pach, nothing. My appetite got more specific. It wasn't enough to eat big. I wanted certain textures. Chewy cartilage, soft, fatty meat, slippery skin. I started buying cheap cuts at the fish market. Heads, tails, scrap. The guy behind the counter raised an eyebrow, but took my cash. I'd go home and boil it all into a pot until the kitchen filled with steam and a smell thick enough to chew. Then I'd stand over the sink and pick apart the skulls, sucking out the cheeks and tongue and eyes. One afternoon, my neighbor's dog, a fat little terrier, got off its leash and came sniffing around my door. I opened it, almost tripping over the dog, and for a second I saw it not as a pet, but as a moving packet of calories. Muscles, fat organs. Warm. I shut the door in its face and sat on the floor until the urge passed. I'm not one of them, I told myself. I'm not. The mirror disagreed. My face thinned, my ears flattened slightly against my skull. The indentations at my neck deepened. My fingers lengthened another millimeter or two. If I spread my hands, my reach had changed. Clothes hung off me, but I felt stronger in a weird way. More efficient. My resting heart rate slowed. I started to feel cold when I was too far from water. Not on my skin, inside. Like my blood temp was wrong. Standing on the pier, I'd feel fine. In a supermarket under fluorescent lights, I'd shiver. One morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Keys Station. Final scuttle scheduled tomorrow 0500. All personnel cleared from site. Area will be restricted 24 hours post-event. No sign-off. No sender name. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. I imagined the modules chained to barges, towed out over the trench. I pictured explosives strapped to the remaining structural points. Charges on a delay. The old hull groaning one last time as it slid into blackness, down past the shallow light, past the thermocline, into the place where sunlight never reaches. They're sealing it, I said aloud to nobody. Sealing them in. The idea made me want to breathe easier. It also made something deep in my chest clench in panic. If they seal it, I can't get back. I hadn't planned on going back. But the part of me that wasn't I had plans of its own. The hunger spiked that night like it knew what was coming. I ate until my jaw hurt. Then I ate more. Canned soup, ramen straight from the packet, peanut butter, frozen fish microwaved until it popped. I emptied my cupboards and went downstairs and bought whatever the little marina convenience store had left. Jerky, crackers, instant oatmeal, candy bars. The clerk gave me a look. Storm coming, she joked. Something like that, I said. It did feel like weather ahead of a storm. Pressure dropped. The air tasted different. The boats rocked more than they should have in a light wind. Around midnight, the pipes in my wall started to sing. Not just knocking. A low, continuous vibration, like a distant ship's engine running at idle. It came up through the floorboards, into the bed frame, into my bones. Ping, ping. Feedback rolled through my skull. I pressed my palms over my ears. It didn't help. At some point, I staggered to my desk and opened a blank document. That's this. What you're listening to now. I figured if I was going to lose myself, I wanted some version of me to exist somewhere outside my skin. Words on a screen, a voice on a recording. A record. I typed until my fingers cramped. They're cramping now. The keys feel too small. Between sentences, my gaze keeps drifting to the window. From up here, I can see the harbor lights. Sodium orange halos over masts and rigging. Beyond them, the black line where the breakwater ends and open water begins. About halfway out, a buoy marks the channel. It has a little light on top that blinks red. Safety for idiots in rental boats who don't know where the channel shoals out. It's blinking now. Between blinks in the darkness, I see something else. Reflections, not on the surface. Under it, little discs of pale light, moving slowly like eyes rolling in deep sockets. I blink. They vanish. Maybe it's my imagination. Maybe it's not. I went by the Navy Yard one last time this morning. Don't ask why. Compulsion. Morbid curiosity. I parked outside the fence and watched through the gap in the slats. The big modules were gone. Only a few smaller pieces remained, wrapped in tarps, waiting to be loaded. A new sign hung on the fence. Do not approach. Underwater live fire testing. Range closed. Nice little lie for the public. Behind the fence, two workers in Navy coveralls were welding a plate over the opening of something squat and cylindrical. The plate was thick, braced with X-beams. As they welded, a muffled sound drifted across the yard. A dull, rhythmic banging. It could have been hammering, metal shifting as it cooled. Any number of innocent things. But it matched the pattern I knew. Talp, talp, talp. Pause. Talp, talp. What the hell are we doing, man? One of the workers said, stepping back, lifting his hood. I could just hear his voice over the clatter. Why not just torch this shit and be done with it? Orders are orders, the other replied, not looking up. Seal it. Drop it. Forget it. Feels wrong, locking something alive in there. Who said it's alive? The first guy scratched his head under the hood. Did you see the spec sheet? Subject, viability uncertain. Assume hostile. That doesn't sound like dead to me. The other welder shrugged. Not our problem. We're just patching the can. Whatever's inside, it's going for a long swim. He struck the arc again. Sparks flared. For a second, through the gap as the light flickered, I thought I saw movement behind the little round window in the cylinder. A pale hand palm pressed to the glass. Long finger splayed. Then the plate slid into place, covering it. Back in the car, I sat with my forehead against the steering wheel until someone honked behind me and I realized I was blocking the driveway. They're sealing it, I thought. Sealing them in. But it's too late. Whatever happened to those men in Keys Station? Whatever Keys and the Navy cooked up, they didn't keep it contained. They opened me, cracked something in me like a vent. I don't think this is a disease. I don't think this is radiation or a fungus or some chemical leak. I think it's adaptation. Those guys in the Minnesota starvation experiment, some of them never came back all the way. Starvation rewired their brains. Food wasn't just food anymore. It was obsession. Identity. Key saw that. The Navy saw that. They thought, if starvation could do that, what else can we make it do? Lock a man underwater for months, starve him just enough, keep him right on the edge of survival, bombard him with pressure and darkness and isolation. See what his body does to survive. It'll grow what it needs. Longer fingers to grip metal and flesh. Bigger eyes to catch the tiniest bit of light. Looser jaws to eat whatever it can get a hold of. Maybe even new ways to pull oxygen from shitty, stale air or thin leaks of water. Those men didn't just get sick. They changed. Now it's seated in me. I know that because the hunger isn't just in my stomach anymore. It's in my marrow, in my cells. When I move, my joints feel smoother, like they've been rebuilt to different specs. My lungs feel too small on land. I find myself taking deeper breaths without meaning to. I can hear things other people can't. The gulls outside sound distant. People talking in the hallway are muffled, like they're behind 3 bulkheads. But the slightest sound from the harbor, water slapping a hull, a fish breaking the surface, a rope creaking, I hear that crystal clear, like it's happening inside my apartment. When a ship goes by, I feel its prop wash in my bones. Last night, I woke up at 3:47 a.m. exactly, heart pounding. I checked the clock. I checked my phone. No alerts, no messages. Then, half a second later, the room shook with a faint, distant thump. En explosion. They scuttled Keys Station right then. Right at that moment. And I felt it. The hunger surged so hard I doubled over, clutching my gut. Every nerve screamed. For a second, my vision went completely black. I could smell cold, deep water, the kind that never sees the sun. I could taste rust. They dropped my problem off the edge of the map. But I'm still here. I'm writing this as a warning. Yeah, but if I'm being honest, I'm also writing it to distract myself from the urge to walk out my door, down the stairs, across the dock, and into the water. My lease is up next month. I don't think I'm going to renew it. The landlord's been on my case about it already. You staying or going, Mike? He asked in the stairwell yesterday, keys jangling at his belt. Got a couple from out of town who want the place if you're moving on. I'm still thinking, I said. My voice sounded wrong to my own ears. Thicker, like I'd been talking underwater for too long. Got to let me know soon, he said. End of the month, tops. End of the month. By then, I don't think I'll be worrying about rent. If you're hearing this, if you somehow got your hands on this recording or these words, listen to me. There are places in the ocean you don't go. You don't go near the coordinates where Keys Station used to sit. You don't go nosing around Navy charts looking for restricted zones labeled something innocuous. You don't take a job hauling up old research modules or obsolete habitats for some extra hazard pay. If they tell you the site's been cleared, that it's all sealed and sunk, that there's nothing living down there anymore, understand? They said that about a lot of things. About radiation sites, about dumping grounds, about deep-sea labs that never went operational. The ocean remembers what we try to hide in it. If you're ever out on the water and you hear tapping on the hull from below, not the random knock of driftwood, but a pattern. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Don't check it out. Don't lean over the rail with a flashlight. Don't joke about sea monsters. Get the hell away. If you're on a ship and the sonar starts picking up returns that don't match anything on the chart, weird big shadows moving too fast, echoes that sound like they're inside the hull, don't push your luck. Turn. Go around. If you're tied up in some quiet harbor at night and you're lying in your bunk and you hear something skitter along the underside of your boat, like nails scraping in sudden bursts, don't convince yourself it's just crabs. Crabs don't whisper. Sometimes I hear it through my apartment floor now. Little scrapes on the underside of the boards, like something's feeling around. Sometimes I hear my name. Not out loud, not in sound. In that space, just behind words, where meanings form. Come back. You belong here. You were always meant to sink. I try to resist. I keep the lights on. I eat until I'm sick. I press my fingers to the marks on my neck and remind myself I still breathe air. But I'm tired. I'm so fucking hungry. I can smell the harbor through the closed window. The scent comes through the cracks. Salt, diesel, kelp, and underneath it all a sharper note. Like the way Keys Station smelled. Like people. There are 36 beds down there. 36 bunks bolted to the floor of a steel tube perched between the crushing weight of the sea and the thin safety of air. 23 were occupied when I opened that door. That leaves 13. I don't think they ever stopped the experiment. Not really. They just moved the lab into any body that survives long enough to crawl away from it. Mine's one of them now. I don't know how long I can hold out. My fingers are too long to type comfortably anymore. The keys feel tiny under my nails. I keep hitting 2 at once. My jaw keeps twitching like it wants to open wider. My eyes ache when I look at bright light. They feel better when I stare into dark water. I've shoved towels against the gaps under my door. It doesn't keep the smell out. When the tide comes in, the whole building settles like a ship taking a little water. The walls creak. The pipes shudder. The sound is almost the same as a hull under stress at depth. It comforts me. It scares me. Because the more it sounds like a ship, the more I feel like I'm already on my way down. If you're listening, don't come here. Don't look for this marina. Don't try to help me. That's not how this works. By the time you found me, whatever's growing in me would smell you coming long before I heard your footsteps. Just stay away from deep water that people in uniforms tell you not to worry about. And if you're ever on a boat at night, and the world is just black waves and colder wind, and you put your hand on the rail and feel a faint tapping travel up from below, and you hear, not with your ears, but with some older part of you, a voice saying hungry, so hungry. Don't lean over to see what's there, because we are still hungry. We will always be hungry. And one way or another, I think I'm going back to depth. I don't know if there's a bed waiting for me down in that steel tomb the Navy dropped into the trench. I think maybe one of them was always mine.